Welcome to Nice and Blunt. My name is Adam Riancho, and it's Saturday, week 3. Time for all of the injury updates across the league, not just on offense, but defense as well. Once that's out of the way, we will update and finalize all of my player rankings at every position this week. So let's get it going. We're going to start with the optimistic, positive news. There are 12 NFL teams with healthy offensive rosters. When it comes to fantasy football, if you have any players on the teams I'm about to mention, they are good to go. In Arizona, they're fully healthy. So are the Atlanta Falcons, the Cleveland Browns, Dallas Cowboys, Detroit Lions, Indianapolis Colts, Jacksonville Jaguars, LA Rams, Las Vegas Raiders, New England Patriots, New York Giants, and Pittsburgh Steelers. All 12 of those offensive rosters are good to go in fantasy football. Now let's move on to the injury report, where in Baltimore, Isaiah Likely has been ruled out with a foot injury. He was limited all week in practice, but is not going to suit up. And while he is getting more involved in the practice reps, Andrews gets one more week to maybe keep his job. He's been terrible so far, so I would still not start Andrews, but with no Isaiah Likely at all, you would expect some extra value for Andrews. So far, it's turned into nothing. In Carolina, Xavier Legette is questionable with a hamstring injury, limited all week in practice, and did get banged up last week. Not only did Hunter Renfrow benefit, so did Bryson Tremaine, a no-name receiver I'd never heard of, who had 5 targets last week. So perhaps Legette will be at least limited, even if he's active. He's a game time decision, and while I'm expecting him to play, I do think Hunter Renfrow is a bit more appealing, knowing that Legette is not 100%. So that's something to monitor in Carolina. In Chicago, DeAndre Swift, the running back, is questionable with a quad injury. He's limited all week as well in practice, and he's a game time decision. Expect him to play. If he's not 100% though, maybe Kyle Monangai or Roshan Johnson finally get some extra volume. But I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think Swift is going to be fine. I think Swift is good to go. I'm not worried about DeAndre Swift. In Cincinnati, we've known this all week, but Joe Burrow was placed on IR with that toe surgery, and he will be out for 3 months. So hopefully he'll be back in December. Until then, Jake Browning gets the upgrade. The backup will get the start against the Vikings. In Green Bay, Jayden Reed is out with that collarbone fracture, and he had surgery to repair it. He also had surgery to repair the toe injury as well. So he was going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks, and in that time frame, maybe Matthew Golden really emerges as the wide receiver 1 in Green Bay. But I would also upgrade Romeo Doubs and Dontavian Wicks in his absence. And this is pretty interesting. Wide receiver Christian Watson, who suffered an ACL injury back in January, is out, was placed on the PUP list this offseason. However, sounds optimistic to return to practice once the PUP window is closed. So a week ago on September 9th, he signed a 1-year, $13.5 million extension with the Packers. And he's talking like he's going to be back on the practice field. They're going to open that 21-day window to return once the PUP is expired. So that means there's a chance that Christian Watson could debut as early as week 6. I wouldn't expect that to happen. They have a bye in week 5, so that's why it's week 6. But in general, he might be on the field by the end of October. That would really mess up the overall exposures in Green Bay. The target share would be kind of out of whack if Watson is factoring in as well, especially when Jayden Reed returns. Who knows who's going to get any volume from week to week in Green Bay? So that could be a problem long term, but for now, it's not relevant this week. Christian Watson is still out. And thankfully, Tucker Kraft is expected to play. He was questionable with a knee injury, limited on Thursday, did not practice Friday, but it sounds like it was just precautionary. There was a minor tweak of his knee, and reportedly he is expected to suit up on Sunday. So I would definitely start him. He's been too good in fantasy to bench so far, but perhaps at Cleveland, they are winning early. Perhaps they don't need everyone to contribute all game long in order to get the victory. And perhaps we do see Luke Musgrave get some extra snaps and run some extra routes. Perhaps Musgrave does factor in a little bit more. So I am not panicking on Kraft, but I don't think he's as elite as week 2 would have suggested. With a minor knee injury, he's probably not 100%. in this matchup. In Houston, Joe Mixon remains out. There's no update at all on his foot injury, but Christian Kirk, the wide receiver who's missed the first 2 games, has been declared active for this game. So it's a revenge game. His former team is Jacksonville, and perhaps he might be relevant immediately. Maybe there's a garbage time touchdown going his way, but we haven't seen anyone be viable with Stroud yet this season. I wouldn't trust him. I did rank him, but I don't think he's worth starting. Not yet. I'd like to see it with Christian Kirk. In Kansas City, unfortunately, Xavier Worthy is out with that shoulder injury, and that's 5 straight limited practices and 2 straight games where he's not on the field. So that means Hollywood Brown gets an upgrade in the target share, definitely the top wide receiver. Travis Kelce also benefits, but you're already starting him. And I also think Tyquan Thornton benefits more than Juju Smith-Schuster. I think Tyquan with his targets down the field is more appealing for fantasy purposes, in my opinion, than Juju Smith-Schuster. I think Tyquan has some appeal this week. But Rashee Rice remains suspended. However, Jalen Royals, the rookie they just drafted, is questionable to make his debut. With a knee injury, he returned to practice. He was limited on Wednesday, and then on both Thursday and Friday, he was full in practice. So he is a game time decision, but I'm expecting the rookie to suit up to make his debut, and perhaps that really craters the value for everyone else if he's actually going to be involved. But it's his first game in the NFL. I'm not expecting too much. I don't think you can start Jalen Royals, but maybe in a super deep format, 14-team league, maybe pick up Royals. There's a chance he does have some value rest of season. In the Chargers offense, Will Dissly, the tight end, is out. And I really think Dissly already lost his job to Tyler Conklin. So Conklin, I think, gets an upgrade, more relevant in the tight end rankings, but probably not enough to start. And perhaps the rookie Oronde Gadsden does benefit, does run some extra routes without Dissly to compete with. So I'm not starting a Chargers tight end, but it is relevant. Maybe Tyler Conklin is more interesting moving forward. And in Las Vegas, tight end Brock Bowers was taken off of the injury report himself. He's going to be fully active, good to go. Limited Wednesday, Thursday, but then on Friday, he was full, taken off the injury report entirely. So that's great news for Brock Bowers. Love to see that. In Minnesota, we already expected J.J. McCarthy to miss time. He'll be out 2 to 4 weeks, and in week 6, they have a bye. So I'm not expecting McCarthy back until week 7. I think Wentz is going to get the start this week, and in both of those Europe games, he'll be the starter against Rodgers and the Steelers in Dublin, and then against the Browns in London in week 5. So I think Wentz will be the guy for now, but I don't trust him until Addison returns. Addison is suspended for 1 more game, and the offense will open up, I think, down the field once Addison is available. So maybe there's some light at the end of the tunnel. In week 4, the Vikings offense might be more appealing, but I would really trust the running back Jordan Mason. Last week when Aaron Jones exited the game, Mason saw 100% of the volume, and Aaron Jones was placed on IR with his hamstring injury, so going to miss at least a month. Ty Chandler, the 3rd string running back, has already been placed on IR earlier in the year. So with a knee injury, he's not coming back anytime soon. The backup in Minnesota is a name I've never heard of before. Xavier Scott does get the upgrade, will be getting some snaps behind Jordan Mason. But Mason, I think, is live to see 75, 85+% of the volume this week. I do think he is a clear must start in Minnesota with Wentz under center. The Bengals matchup is very appealing. I think I ranked him a bit too low earlier in the week. So definitely start Jordan Mason this week. And then in New Orleans, wide receiver Devaughn Vele, questionable with a hip injury. He's a game time call. No one's starting him in fantasy. But last week he had a touchdown. Maybe that goes to someone else in the Saints offense. In the New York Jets offense, Justin Fields is out with that concussion. Hopefully it's just 1 week, but Tyrod Taylor does get the start, and he might lock on to Garrett Wilson a little extra because Josh Reynolds is going to miss this game once again. He was out last week. It didn't really change much, so I don't really care about Josh Reynolds being inactive. In general, the Jets offense loses value with Tyrod under center. In Philadelphia, Will Shipley will miss the 2nd game in a row with an oblique injury, and last week, Tank Bigsby was irrelevant, not a single touch. A.J. Dillon had 3, and Will Shipley's volume did just go to Saquon Barkley, as expected. So, doesn't change anything in Philadelphia. And then in Seattle, Zach Charbonnet has been ruled doubtful with a foot injury. He didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday. Didn't do anything on Friday either. With no practice reps, there's no chance Charbonnet is active this week. So they don't need him to beat the Saints. I think Walker is going to get a massive volume here. And there's a chance that rookie 7th-round pick Damian Martinez does factor in as well. But they also have George Holani, the backup in Seattle, will be a mix of 2 players. I'm only trusting Walker in Seattle. But Jaxon Smith-Njigba was added to the injury report. He is questionable with an illness on Saturday. And I don't think it's cause to panic. I would still expect JSN to play, but you never know. He'll be a game time decision on Sunday. It's an afternoon window. Maybe Cooper Kupp and Torrey Horton are a bit more relevant. There's a chance that JSN is inactive, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think with an illness, odds are after just one day, I think he'll be fine. I still would start JSN, but make sure he suits up. Zach Charbonnet, I don't expect to play. Walker's a must start. And then in San Francisco, we already know that George Kittle's on IR, but Brock Purdy practiced in limited capacity on Thursday and will be a backup quarterback most likely on Sunday. He's listed as questionable, but Kyle Shanahan said he's highly unlikely to suit up, and he will just be an emergency quarterback, probably the 3rd string option behind Mac Jones. So not expecting Purdy to suit up. I'm still ranking Mac Jones as the starter this week, but Jauan Jennings' status is completely up in the air. Jauan Jennings did not practice a single day this week with both an ankle and shoulder injury. So even though he looked pretty good last week, was the top target for Mac Jones, I don't think he'll be available this game. And even if he is, he might be more of a decoy, but they do need him in division against Arizona. So maybe it's just giving him the veteran rest. However, with his lack of practice time in the preseason, I think it's a cause for concern here. It's definitely a red flag, and I just wouldn't start Jauan Jennings if I didn't have to. There's a chance he's not 100%, maybe starts the game and then isn't healthy enough to finish it. I think there's some heavy risk with Jauan Jennings. So Ricky Pearsall, I think the only wide receiver in San Francisco worth the start this week, does get an upgrade with the injury to Jauan Jennings. And next week, expect Demarcus Robinson to be active for the Niners. He's been suspended with a DUI charge, and that's a 3-game suspension. So just like Jordan Addison, he'll be back next week, but inactive in week 3. Brandon Ayuk is out, but off the PUP list after week 4. It sounds like Shanahan is optimistic that maybe in week 6, we could see Ayuk back on the field. That's the earliest to expect Ayuk to be healthy. For now, it's the Pearsall, Jauan Jennings, and then next week, Demarcus Robinson show at receiver in San Francisco. In Denver, Evan Engram was ruled out, so he's not going to play. He's been banged up since week 1, and overall, that's to the benefit of Cortland Sutton and Troy Franklin. I do not trust Adam Troutman at tight end. So don't start Evan Engram. I don't think you were in the first place. He's been really bad, but not even going to be active in this game. And then in Tampa Bay, Chris Godwin has been ruled out yet again. And Godwin was never placed on the PUP list, so even though we weren't expecting him to play, he's been starting to practice. Last week he was limited on Thursday, and then this week he was limited in all 3 days. So I think next week he might make one upgrade to full, perhaps. And in week 4, there's a chance that he returns. They're playing the Eagles at home. I think they want him healthy as possible for that game. So maybe he's ready to go this week and they're just playing it safe. I think Godwin will be back next week, and that could factor in maybe some diminished value for Mike Evans and Egbuka. But also, Egbuka is a name to watch in this game. He's questionable with a hip and groin injury that he suffered last week. He did not practice Wednesday or Thursday, but on Friday, Egbuka was limited. So I think he's going to be fine. They're expecting him to play based on the reports. He's a game time decision, but he's a young rookie. I think he'll be fine. I think he'll suit up against the Jets in the home opener. But if somehow he doesn't, then Mike Evans and Cade Otton do become more appealing. Otton, I think, would be a must start if Egbuka is unavailable. I would expect a touchdown for Otton if Egbuka can't suit up. But if Egbuka's there, then can't start Otton. I just think it's too random of a target share in Tampa to start the tight end. But Jalen McMillan remains on IR. There is no update for him. And then in Tennessee, Tyjae Spears also on IR. There is no update for him either. He had a high ankle sprain back in early August. I think when the PUP list is over, there's a chance he's right back on the field in week 5. Tyjae might be a good pickup to stash, especially if you have an IR slot. Heading into week 4, there might be more interest in Tyjae. A good pickup on Saturday night before rosters lock on Sunday. Tyjae has value rest of season. In Washington, the last team to mention would be Jayden Daniels being out. The quarterback is not going to be available with a knee injury. And Marcus Mariota was pretty serviceable last year when filling in for him. So Mariota, I think, is a very good streaming option at quarterback this week, but it does diminish the upside for Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, and Zach Ertz. There's just going to be fewer pass attempts overall and a lot less down the field. Mariota's not as talented of a thrower as Jayden Daniels. So that is kind of a bummer, but kind of irrelevant as well. I still think you know who you're starting in Washington. And then Eckler being on IR means that JSM and McNichols are more valuable in this backfield. But that's what we expected. We knew that was the case. I already ranked him that way earlier in the week. But Noah Brown is also out for the Commanders with a groin injury. Maybe Jalen Lane and Luke McCaffrey do run some extra routes. So that's it for all of the injury updates on offense. Now I'd like to pivot to the defensive side of the ball, where there are some players doubtful and out who I do think really move the needle for fantasy upgrades and downgrades. In Arizona, the cornerback situation is one to monitor. Max Melton is questionable, and I think he'll play, but not a guarantee. However, cornerback Will Johnson, the rookie out of Michigan, is doubtful. He's looked really good through the first 2 games. So that means Ricky Pearsall gets an upgrade. The matchup's not going to be as difficult if Will Johnson is not lining up alongside him. So I would trust Ricky Pearsall quite a bit. Maybe Jauan Jennings, if active, also deserves an upgrade, but given his injury status, the main upgrade, in my opinion, is only for Ricky Pearsall. In Atlanta, cornerback AJ Terrell is also out, so that's pretty relevant. He's one of their better cornerbacks. Tet McMillan, I think, is a bit safer, and also Hunter Renfrow, as the depth chart needs to factor in Atlanta. I do think Hunter Renfrow is a bit more appealing. Also, with the Legette injury, maybe Renfrow, his volume is legit from last week. In Carolina, the opposite side of the ball, there are 2 offensive linemen who were placed on IR this week, and most notably their center probably diminishes the value for Chuba Hubbard. The run blocking probably not going to be as good without the starters in there. So it could have been worse. There were also some guys questionable earlier in the week that are going to be active, but still the Panthers' offensive line is pretty banged up. Missing 2 starters, that's not good. In Chicago, 8 defensive players, mostly in the secondary, are either out or on IR. Most notably, Jalen Johnson and 2 of their best nickel corners are inactive this week. So Dak Prescott and the Dallas wide receivers get an upgrade, but I already mentioned that earlier in the week, so my logic doesn't change. In Cincinnati, Shamar Stewart, the rookie defensive end, has been ruled out as well. So maybe more time in the pocket for Carson Wentz. Maybe he's not as bad as we're expecting, but I also think that benefits the run game for the Vikings. Jordan Mason should be even better, but cornerback Cam Taylor-Britt, one of their better options in the secondary, is doubtful. Maybe Justin Jefferson also is a bit safer with that injury in the Bengals secondary. In Denver, linebacker Dre Greenlaw was placed on IR, so he'll be missing at least 4 games. Maybe the run game for the Chargers is more effective. And then in Indianapolis, cornerback Charvarius Ward will play this week. Last week he didn't suit up, but the Colts actually really shut down Cortland Sutton without him, but they also got torched by Troy Franklin. So in general, the Titans passing game maybe not as good this week with the Colts top corner. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the Titans don't upset Indianapolis, but I only think this is relevant for Calvin Ridley. I still think the Cam Ward experiment this week is worth monitoring. Ridley, I do think, loses some value going up against Charvarius Ward. He's a very legit corner to worry about. In Minnesota, linebacker Andrew Van Ginkel, who didn't play last week, was upgraded to questionable going into week 3. Harrison Smith, the safety, is questionable as well. He has yet to play at all this season, so that is moving in the right direction on both players. So I'm expecting them to play, but maybe they don't. Maybe they're not 100%. Both of them have been out so far this season, and that would benefit a defense that's definitely missing them. So perhaps Jake Browning, not as effective as we might think. But in New England, cornerback Christian Gonzalez remains out. 3rd straight game he's unavailable, and the Patriots defense has been really bad at stopping the pass. They've allowed 338 yards per game so far this season to opposing quarterbacks. That's Geno Smith and Tua going over 300 yards in both weeks so far. So I do like Rodgers this week. I also think DK Metcalf is a safe play, going to have a good game against the Patriots. There's no one in the secondary that scares you other than Gonzalez. In New Orleans, linebacker Chase Young is out, so maybe Kenneth Walker gets even more looks in the run game. Sam Darnold maybe extra time in the pocket. And in Pittsburgh, linebacker Alex Highsmith is out. Cornerback Joey Porter Jr. out as well. And strong safety Deshaun Elliott was ruled out just like last week. Both him and Joey Porter Jr. did not play last week. And they give up a lot of yards to Darnold. So I do think Diggs and Drake May benefit as well. I think the Patriots offense will move the ball in the passing game this week. And in Seattle, cornerback Devon Witherspoon is doubtful. He didn't play last week, and so is free safety Julian Love, along with free safety Nick Emanwari. All three of those secondary players are doubtful, just like last week. And it didn't matter last week. They won pretty comfortably, so maybe they don't stop the pass against Rattler, but they still probably get the win. I'm not too worried about it. Lastly, in Tennessee, cornerback L'Jarius Sneed is questionable himself, and so is cornerback Jarvis Brownlee. So perhaps Daniel Jones does look good for the third straight week. Maybe Daniel Jones proves me wrong and looks very legit with some injuries in Tennessee. But I'm still going to pick the Titans to win that game. I am a believer in Cam Ward. So that's it for all of the injury updates at every position, not just offense, but defense. And now let's mention the changes in my rankings. At running back, very few things changed. I was already telling you to start Kenneth Walker, but now you have to do it. I upgraded him 3 spots with no Zach Charbonnet. The touchdown is so much more likely to bet on, and I bumped him up a full tier, but I already had him at number 15 entering the week, so I'm just a little more confident. I don't think I can put him in the top 10, not above Jacobs, not above A-Chain, and I also think Javonte Williams still gets a better matchup. His workload's also not threatened at all. So love Javonte and Kenneth Walker this week inside the top 12. Definitely must start running backs this week. I also think Jordan Mason was just ranked a little bit too low, so I upgraded him 3 spots as well. I already had him at 19, so I was telling you to start Jordan Mason already, but I just think it's more of a lock with some injuries to the Bengals defensive line, along with Aaron Jones being out, the backup quarterback. Everything seems to be pretty obvious. The Vikings are going to run the ball, and Mason has no threat for competition. So love Mason this week, a clear must start. But until we know what the Wentz offense looks like, I don't think I can put him in that elite top 13 tier. But at 16, one of the best RB2s this week, definitely have to start Mason if you have him. So with those 2 players moving up, everybody in this little section here, other than them, moves down 1 spot. They all get jumped by 1 spot. And then other than that, I did remove Zach Charbonnet, but I didn't rank him top 35 in the first place, so I wasn't going to start him. And then I did rank Kyle Monangai in the top 50, just because DeAndre Swift is technically questionable. But I do expect Swift to play. I don't think Monangai has any value whatsoever. Next up, let's talk about the wide receiver position, where when I removed Xavier Worthy, everyone outside the top 9 does bump up 1 spot. I was optimistic about Worthy earlier in the week, and he's not going to suit up. So London and everyone behind him does get a 1 spot upgrade because of that. And there's nothing that changes in terms of overall player to pair rankings. I think they're all kind of the same based on how I viewed them on Wednesday. So only until I hit wide receiver 28, AJ Brown, is there a sizable difference. And I think I was just a little too low on the Eagles pass catchers. They're still the Eagles wide receivers. They still have a lot of talent. And at some point, Jalen Hurts is going to have to throw the ball deep down the field. So AJ Brown can break a big play at any time. So can Devontae. While I am worried about them, they've been really bad so far. It's only 2 games. It's still too small a sample size to fully panic. So they're not in the top 25, but I think outside the top 30, they were ranked too low. I think they deserve a 5 spot upgrade based on my ranking on Wednesday. I think they are top 30 at the position. So I am bumping up Metcalf and Pearsall in my opinion, and I also upgrade AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, but I would rather go Metcalf and Pearsall still above AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. I think the injuries at corner opposite them are matchups that I'm not worried about, and definitely some high upside with those 2 players. So AJ Brown, Devontae Smith in the lower end flex conversation, but definitely I would still project them for 10 plus points at some point it's got to click. And then I downgraded Calvin Ridley and Jauan Jennings. I previously had both of them in my top 30, and given Charvarius Ward's going to be active, I don't feel as confident in Ridley anymore. And then given Jauan Jennings didn't practice at all this week, if he plays, you can't feel good about starting him at all. So this rank on Jauan is actually just a tentative ranking. At 38, I would still rather start him than Wan'Dale Robinson or either of the Packers receivers. However, if he doesn't play, then you have to take him out. And if he does, there's also some decoy potential. I'd be a bit worried about Jauan Jennings this week. So just like Ridley, they both moved down a full tier, about 7-9 spots apiece. And I also upgraded Hollywood Brown a full tier as well. He moves up 12 overall spots. I previously thought Worthy would diminish his value. Now with Worthy out, Hollywood will see the most targets of any Chiefs receiver. So he's a safer play. Got him at 32 now, moves up 12 spots overall. Outside the top 40, I did swap my ranking on Stephon Diggs and Chris Olave. Olave gets the toughest matchup this week against Seattle and Riq Woolen. And I think Diggs does get an upgrade because Joey Porter Jr. of the Steelers is inactive. So Diggs feels a bit safer, but the Patriots target share is random, so hard to fully trust. And then Olave has done very little with his volume. I hate the matchup. Not going to start either of them this week, but I did flip them in the ranks. And then outside of Olave, I did bump up 3 players in the top 50. I think Hunter Renfrow might actually be somewhat legit. This week will confirm or deny if week 2 was a factor. I think at least as like a tentative bench stash, maybe Renfrow's actually worth picking up because there's also AJ Terrell, the cornerback for the Falcons, who is going to be missing this matchup. With Legette questionable with a hamstring injury, it can't all go to Tet McMillan. I think Renfrow could benefit yet again. So I think Renfrow is a top 50 option, but probably not bold enough to start him in a regular league. And then I also think Tyquan Thornton is moving up the rankings as well. With no Xavier Worthy, Tyquan is live to be getting those deep targets down the field that could turn into a 50-yard touchdown. Tyquan has some legit upside. I am actually tempted to start him over Hollywood, but I wouldn't do that. I would only expect the main volume to go to Hollywood, and then Tyquan down the field has upside if one of those passes does connect. And then lastly, in the top 50, I also ranked Christian Kirk versus the Jaguars. And in a revenge game, maybe he does score a touchdown, but we haven't seen him at all this season, and no other Texans receiver has been viable at all other than one touchdown to Nico Collins. So I don't trust the Stroud receivers yet. Not going to start Kirk, but might be ranked like 15 spots higher next week. And in the top 50, definitely worth mentioning. If he's on the waiver wire, I would pick him up. And then lastly, the only other player I thought I was ranking too low earlier on was Dontavian Wicks. Could be more valuable than both Golden or Romeo Doubs straight up. So outside the top 60, it was too low, but at 56, I have him in the same range as Waddle and Shaheed. You need the touchdown, and it probably doesn't happen. It could be a bagel if not for that 3-yard touchdown that went to Waddle this week. So too risky, but Wicks might have some roster appeal if he breaks out this week. And then otherwise, the only other change I made in my rankings at all were at the tight end position. I upgraded Kyle Pitts and downgraded Zach Ertz. I actually swapped them in the rankings around Jonnu Smith. I think Smith is more likely to score a touchdown than Ertz this week, so I would still rather start him. But I think the volume, especially deep down the field, will be safer for Kyle Pitts. So I think Kyle Pitts is actually the best streaming option, the highest floor play you can find. And I think I was just a little too low on him earlier in the week. I put him at 11 now. You can start him if you need to. But with Mariota, I downgraded Ertz. I think I was just ranking him too high. His role is not going to be as efficient without Jayden Daniels. So still in the top 15, but downgraded 2 spots. I'd rather go Pitts and Jonnu over Ertz. And then in the top 20, I did upgrade Mark Andrews 5 spots overall because Isaiah Likely was ruled out. But Evan Engram was also ruled out, so he was taken out. Andrews takes his place. And at tight end 19, he hasn't shown you enough to trust him at all. So maybe he bounces back, maybe he plays well, but I just don't see it. Andrews could be a drop candidate pretty fast when Isaiah Likely inevitably takes over as their top tight end. So I'm pretty worried about Andrews. Maybe you'll try and trade him if he has a touchdown this week, but I would hit the panic button rest of season. And then with Likely and Engram exiting the rankings overall, I do have Tyler Conklin and Pat Freiermuth entering the top 25, they were at 26, 27. Now they make the cutoff in the top 25, but wouldn't start him, not yet, even though Disley is out. Not going to trust Tyler Conklin, not yet. So those are my tight end rankings. Here are the top 22 at quarterback, tight end, and defense. I did not change a single thing at quarterback or defense. Everything I expected on Friday is how it's going to go at those two positions. So if you need more time, you can pause the screen and make those lineup decisions. But now I will move on to the flex rankings, my top 40, 42 at the running back and wide receiver spot. And in general, I'm mainly only starting the top 20 running backs and top 24 wide receivers with absolute confidence. Those are the only guys that are locked into my lineup for the most part. But once we hit Jalen Waddle at running back through David Montgomery, those are the flex plays similar to T. Higgins through Terry McLaurin. And I think those players are the main names that are like in the mix if you have good depth in your lineup. If you don't have the best depth, then maybe you have to start players beyond the black line. And once we pass the orange and red lines, that's the no-go zone. I'm pretty uninspired in trusting them this week. So as always, if you have any questions, let me know in the comment section. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Good luck in week 3. My name is Adam Riancho. I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.